Næsti maður á mælendaskrá Martin Harrison og hann er, já, það ekki til orðið yfir það á íslensku eiginlega, senior planner hjá auglýsingastofu sem heitir Huge og þetta eru svona mjög, hvað að segja, þeir hafa einbeitt sem mikið að svona framtíðarmiðlun og unnið gott starf frá 1999 og ég held að sé engin ástæða til annars en að gefa honum bara svið og þið megið líka alveg klappa fyrir þeim þegar þið komum på svið, það er líka mjög góður siður svona alþjóðlegur. En ég gef Martin Harrison svið, gjörðu svo vel.
Martin Harrison er senior planner hjá Huge. Martin hefur búið á bar, getur keyrt liftara en ekki bíl og trúir á að gera hlutin eins einfalda og mögulegt er. En ekki einfaldar en það.
Thank you. Hello. You can hear me all right? Good. I'm Martin Harrison, Senior Planner at Huge. I work in the London office. We've got our biggest office is in Brooklyn, in New York. We've got 7 offices in the States. And we believe that great user experiences are what drive business performance and marketing. And the reason that we believe that is because we're in a time of transformation. The way in which people are interacting with businesses and companies is going through a fundamental change. I think a lot of the things that we just heard about how mobile can transform the way in which people find business and interact with businesses, particularly local businesses and locations, is part of that story. But what we're seeing is, over time, the amount of sales that are influenced by digital is growing year on year. And we're now at the point where about 50% of all purchasing decisions have been influenced digitally in some way, shape, or form. And that's only going to increase. That's going to kind of get bigger and bigger and bigger. So that has a fundamental implication for how your business operates. Because what we're talking about are post-digitals, which it sounds quite weird to be talking about people who are already post-digital. But these are people who've only ever known the internet. So when they were born, broadband already existed. They already accessed the internet through multiple different devices. I find it strange. In my house, I've got, I was just totaling it up, I've got 2 laptops, a PC, an iPad, an Xbox, a PlayStation, 3 iPhones, and I can access the internet through all of those different things. For HBO in the United States, we built their on-demand app so people could get to their content. They have to get to the content through all of those devices, and every single device has got a different interface. But that's all that these people have ever known. For them, it's not strange to ask the internet questions. For them, it's just the way that you live. And all of the things that they do are intermediated by digital. So, you know, their social lives, the way in which they arrange things, the way in which they talk to each other, the decisions that they make, and they know how to find things out. They know how Google works. It's really, really kind of easy for people to get answers. And so, like, to me, it's a bit of a tragedy because it's the death of an argument in the pub, because somebody can just look it up and then say, oh, no, here, Wikipedia says that it was 1972. So the thing is that what you see is also people are just naturally doing things like being in a shop and looking at a piece of furniture or looking at a product and thinking, oh, that's really nice, I like that, I wonder how much it is on Amazon. And then right there they can look and they can go, brilliant, it's £10 cheaper, I'll buy it on Amazon. And they stand in your store and they buy it from Amazon. And they don't see that as being rude. That's just the way that the world works. Also, the way in which they work out value, prices, the way in which they discover things, the way in which they come across new products they might want to buy, or films that they want to see, is generally going to be through digital. The other really important thing about this post-digital user, this is our chief exec's cousin. She has no idea she's been now globally used as an example of a post-digital consumer. But in a few years, she'll be the primary decision maker in the household. One of my clients is Unilever, and we know from Unilever that approximately 70 to 80% of all purchasing decisions in the household is made by the woman of the house. So this person will be in charge of the discretionary household spend. And we're talking about in 3 to 5 years, when she moves out, gets married, has her first child, then she's going to be making all of those decisions, and she's going to be using digital to make effective decisions. So what it means is this, is that when most sales are influenced by digital, there is no such thing as an offline business. You can't ignore the internet and hope it goes away or that it's a fad. You have to engage, because people are finding out about you through digital. One great way, I worked quite a lot in social media, and one great way that we used to get clients to invest was we'd do a report. This is what people are saying about you in social media and digitally. And the client go, oh my God, that's terrible. We can't let them say that. I was like, okay, so now we need to respond, so we need a social media strategy. But that's the thing, people are talking about you, people are discussing you, so there is no such thing as an offline business. And if there is no such thing as an offline business, that's a challenge. Every organization needs to do something about this challenge. You need to have a strategy to address it. And that's the big question. So what do you do? The way that we look at it is think about users, not customers. You'll be told consistently the customer is always right. Look after your customers. If you make a great customer experience or you have great customer service, then your business will grow. But in actual fact, your business or organization is interacted with by an awful lot more than just people who want to buy things from you. There's people who want to know what you're doing. There's people who want to know the history of your business. There's suppliers, partners, people who want to sell to you. All of those people will now start to interact with you through what we call the software layer. Just basically, you've got your core business, and then people come in and communicate with you about your core business, ask you questions, find out about you through a software layer. And this is fundamental to the organization. It goes from your website, where you might be selling stuff, through to your warehouse, where you're organizing stuff, where you're bringing products in, and so on. Everything suddenly becomes something that has to move through this software layer before people can effectively interface with your business. And theoretically, you should be in a position where you don't need people. That these people and the really effective digital businesses allow people to come in, self-select, decide what they want, add options to it, go through a checkout, put in their delivery address and their payment details, and buy from you, and that entire process is done by them. All the business needs to do is build an effective interface to allow that to happen. So essentially, you're going to have two businesses to run, and that's a very difficult thing. But if you get it right, and you start to understand post-digitals and you start to see how they're interacting with you and how they interact with you digitally, you can build something very powerful. So the next thing I wanted to talk about then is if we do have this software layer, if people are starting to come and speak to you and interact with you and trade with you, if you like, through a software layer, what is this cultural landscape like? The reason why I say it's a cultural landscape is I read this quote ages ago, and I thought it was brilliant. It was on a newsletter that I read, and the guy writing it said, he had an example of a website, he just offhand said, you know that bit of the internet that nobody goes to, where all the companies have their brand websites? And I remember just thinking, it like made me stop and think, Jesus, this is what I'm doing with my life. I'm building ghost towns where nobody goes. And it's quite a scary thought, because, you know, there's a couple of my clients have come to me and said, do we actually really need a website? Because nobody seems to be going to it. To which my response is, well, you need a good website, and then people would go to it. Facebook is not necessarily the answer to all of your questions. And the thing is, the reason why the internet's so important is because it's about people and connecting people. Years ago, I worked with a guy who went from being an account director to managing director of the digital arm of our agency in about 6 months. And one night, I cornered him in a pub, and I said to him, right, what is it? Where do you get all these ideas from? Like, every meeting we're in, like, ideas and ideas and ideas and ideas. This was his answer. Porn, Martin, porn. And he said, the thing is that digital is about connecting people with people. And there's no industry that's kind of better at understanding our dark desires than porn. Then he said, the other thing is, any idea that you say, the chances are nobody's seen it, but if they have seen it, they're never going to say that they've seen it, so you're fine. But it's the thing, it's about people connecting. It's about people getting together. And we used to have this kind of model where, oh, let's build a website, we'll get people to come to our website. And when they come to their website, what we'll get them to do is, and you have this whole thing about, brilliant, we've got this new channel, this new opportunity where we can bring people in and we can make them do what we want to do. And it's fundamentally not true, because what people want to do is arrange pillow fights, or go on flash mobs, or go on dates together, or whatever it might be. But the point is that the internet was created to allow this human-to-human interaction to happen. It wasn't created for you. It wasn't created for businesses to be able to perform better or sell better. That's a nice thing that we can do, that we can use it to. But fundamentally, you've got to understand that you're moving into a space that was created for people to interact with other people. This is Joey Barton. I don't know how many of you have heard of him. He's a fairly unpleasant footballer. But at the end of last season, he got sent off in a match. And on Match of the Day, which is the BBC One's kind of premier football show, Alan Shearer kind of pompously said, I think he's a disgrace. Match of the Day is watched by 3.3 million people approximately. Joey Barton's followed by 1.7 million people on Twitter. So Alan Shearer said, I think he's a disgrace. Joey Barton went on Twitter and said, well, I think you're a prick. And I think, for me, whether you like him or not, I think it's incredible that that type of conversation can now happen. That Joey Barton the reason he's built so many followers is he just says what he's thinking. He's open and he's honest, and he just puts it out there. And people are fascinated. They want to see that. They want to know. And quite apart from wanting to know his opinion, they want to have an opinion on his opinion. So these things move really, really quickly. I think it's incredible that he can insert himself in this conversation just through sheer weight of followers. And it's kind of, you can say that, you know, to a certain extent, gossip is information. But information is much more than that. And I think this quote, which you may have seen before, is a really interesting one. Information wants to be free. And the reason it's interesting, two things. One is that who said it and when it was said. But I'm going to break the rules of presentations here and show you a long slide with a lot of words on, and then I'm going to read the words. But I think it's a great quote. So, information wants to be free. Information also wants to be expensive. Information wants to be free because it has become so cheap to distribute, copy, and recombine, too cheap to meter. It wants to be expensive because it can be immeasurably valuable to the recipient. That tension will not go away. It leads to endless wrenching debate about price, copyright, intellectual property, the moral rightness of casual distribution, because each round of new devices makes the tension worse, not better. Said by Stuart Brand at the first Hackers Conference in 1984. So in 1984, I was 8 years old. We had a ZX Spectrum at home in Ireland, and people used to drive around to our house to watch us play Frogger. And at that time, this guy at the first Hackers Conference was talking about this debate that we still haven't managed to resolve. We still haven't really worked out what we do about this 30, 40 years later. The other interesting thing is where he said it, the first Hackers Conference. These are the people who were building the internet. People who went to the first Hackers Conference then went on to work at AOL, to work at Google, to work at Microsoft, to work at Yahoo. They decided how the internet was going to be put together. So this debate, this fundamental kind of problem, is one that right from the beginning has been a philosophical problem as well as a business problem. The third interesting thing is Stuart Brand, who Stuart Brand was. Stuart Brand was one of the Merry Pranksters, so the group of kind of countercultural heroes who got on a bus and drove across America in the 60s. Neil Cassidy was one of the Merry Pranksters who was featured in On the Road by Jack Kerouac, and that's actually Stuart Brand there with Ken Kesey, who wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So the keynote speaker at the first Hackers Conference came directly out of countercultural movement in the States. The internet, when you go into it, when you start to use the internet, you're going into a place that has got beliefs and philosophies and people who are arguing about what the internet's actually for. And when you go into the internet, you need to understand, you need to acknowledge this, you need to realize, you know? You have to be respectful for the people who are there. It's a bit like, I always say that we treat it as a channel, a place that we can put messages, put our marketing messages into a channel. But it's not, it's a market. It's like if you were expanding into a different country. You'd find out what it's like, you'd find out what the culture is like, you'd find out who's influential. You'd make sure you had someone on the ground who understood it. So then it came to pass that we realized, you know, we've got to be nice to people. So instead of trying to get them to our websites, let's start to talk to them, let's start to circulate, let's make content that they can consume that's going to be useful. And further than that, let's kind of stop telling people what we want them to know. Let's stop shouting at them. Let's start helping them to do things. Let's start enabling them to interact with us. So it's about marketing that's useful. When you start to understand what these people want and how they're behaving, you can be useful to them. And it is, you know, simple little things like for HBO Go, for example, we had some like great ideas about what we could do, but ultimately we found out people wanted to get to the content as quickly as possible. We had to get out of the way. We had to make the play button the most important thing. On every single device, we then have to think about how do we get to the play button as quickly as possible. It's about allowing people to self-serve, allowing them to decide, you know, how they want their pizza delivered. It's allowing them to specify the day on which they would like things delivered so that they know that they're in and they can arrange somebody to collect and so on. These are all useful things. Give people things that will make their lives easier and they will buy from you. So then I just wanted to move on, and so if it is a cultural landscape and it does have its beliefs and so on, there's some interesting mechanics within that landscape, so I'm just going to race through a few of these. First one is men and women are different. It's been mentioned once already. It's a fantastic insight. But this stat leapt out at me and I thought it was really interesting. So Facebook and Wikipedia are massive. So in terms of the people who use it, it reflects the population. It's approximately 50-50 men and women. However, less than 30% of the updates on Facebook are made by men. But over 70% of the updates made to Wikipedia are by men. To the point where Wikipedia actually did a campaign to say, can we have more women updating Wikipedia because all we're getting is the male viewpoint on every single thing in the world, which is not necessarily the most accurate viewpoint. But it's this thing, men instinctively collect and catalogue. Right? There's a brilliant Forrester tool, which I'd recommend that you have a look at, where they categorize people's behavior within social media. And they have this category called collectors. Now, collectors is always the smallest category. There's not very many people who do this, but collectors are people who post stuff to dig, who update Wikipedia, who share things on Reddit, who share things on Facebook, who will be moderators on forums, all of that type of thing, where they're actively kind of like curating the content of the internet. And it's always the smallest group, but it's always overrepresented in every country by men aged between 25 to 34. You'll always find that it massively over-indexes on that, which I think is really, really interesting because if you're collecting and curating culture, you're shaping culture. And I think it's no coincidence that kind of Google's mission to take, organize all the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. So there is this thing about collecting, about putting it all together, making it all accessible. And again, it goes back to this thought of information wants to be free. We want people to know this stuff because the more easy it is for you to find things out, the more empowered you are and the better the decisions that you can make. So often as businesses, we think, well, no, there's things we don't want people to know. There's secrets that we need to keep. We can't just let somebody go out on a Twitter feed and start talking about us. That's outrageous. They need to be trained. We need to make sure that they know what to talk about and what not to talk about. That's fundamentally not really how the internet is supposed to work. And that's when you run into difficulty, is that you're trying to behave in a space in a way that's not appropriate to that space. But the second kind of implication of this is this idea of curation, right? What do you do on a Facebook page? For example, we've all got Facebook pages, or your Twitter feed, for example. 9 times out of 10, you'll share things that other people have made. There's very few people in the world who are actually creative, who actually make stuff. Unfortunately, they're expensive to employ. But there are very few people who do that. What we do instead is we curate, right? And I think curation is a much abused word because I think it's an incredibly powerful thing to do. If I have a book and I give that book to you and I say, I read this and I loved it, I think you'll love it. There's a lot more that goes on in that transaction than me just giving you a book. I'm telling you that, I'm hopefully telling you that I understand you. And if you do read the book and you do love it, then you get something more from that. You understand that, I understand you, and it's a fundamental way of kind of moving forward. And William Gibson said something very interesting about that. He said that there's something post-national and extra-geographic about this behavior. We don't care where the content came from. We don't care, you know, kind of where it was made or why it was made. We just care if it's kind of interesting or cool and we want to share it. He said we're all curators in the postmodern world, whether we want to or not. What your Facebook stream is a curation of the things that you're doing in your life. You decide what it is that you're going to share. So you'll get those photos that you took last night. You'll select the ones where you look least drunk. And then those are the ones that you're going to put on Facebook. So you're always curating. And by curating, you start to shape culture. You start to decide what it is that's relevant or not relevant. So these people, these guys who are curating, collecting, sharing, they actually start to shape how the world works. The example I have of this is when I was young, Star Trek was a joke. And Trekkies were jokes. You laughed at them. You laughed at Star Wars. Now, Star Wars is the most, not Star Wars, sorry, Star Trek. Now, Star Trek is the most eagerly anticipated film of next summer because the people who arrange stuff on the internet always liked Star Trek and they really like Star Trek. And now, suddenly, that drive, that kind of support of Star Trek has turned it into something that's really, really cool. It's literally how the geeks are inheriting the Earth. And you need to think about that. What can you give them that's going to kind of appeal to that? We have for Pizza Hut in the States, you can collect badges when you order pizzas, and one of the badges is million pizzas. So you can get a badge when you've ordered 1 million pizzas. That just appeals to geeks. They just look at that and go, it's funny. And it's a really nice little kind of example of how you can make something that appeals to that kind of that mindset. And the other thing as well is I used to work with a guy called Doug Falvey, and he said this to a client, and I was horrified. But he said, for me, it's political. The internet is like the environment. People think it's unlimited, but it's not. And if I can stop you filling it up with shit, then I think I've done a good thing. But this is really interesting, because Doug was kind of the first guy that I met that really, really understood and embraced the internet and thought it was an amazing, transformative thing. I think he told me he thought it was potentially the most awesome thing that mankind had ever managed to do. Right? And he got into marketing and went to clients for this reason. He said, I want to stop you fucking it up. And that's really, really important, because when people see you doing things that they believe are wrong or that go against the philosophy, of the internet or that are kind of trying to shut down, they'll come after you, and they'll come after you in quite a scary way. The final thing I'm going to talk about then are the new leaders in this digital space. There's a fantastic piece of research, actually. I was thinking these slides are the wrong way around. Opinion leaders exist in all occupational groups and every social and economic level. So there's a study done in 1955 about the way information permeates through society. And what they posited, I've forgotten their names now, Katz and Lazarsfeld, what they posited was that the way information works is that from mass media sources, it goes out to everybody, right? Everybody gets that message. But then a vast amount of people will turn to someone who's influential in their sphere and ask them what they should feel about it. It's like, oh, right, I heard this. What do you think of it? And that person will say, well, I think X, Y, Z. And then they will take that opinion, and they'll carry that opinion along. It's called a two-step learning process. First of all, you hear about it, and then somebody else explains to you what it actually means. The really interesting thing about this is that it works like supercharged on Twitter. It's ridiculous, right? So there was a brilliant study done about how information moves through Twitter, and it looked at the links that people clicked on. And what they found was that 20,000 elite users, and by elite users, they mean people who've got more than 1 million followers, who are famous usually for some other reason. In general, there will be celebrities, but also media outlets tend to fall into this quite a lot. And people who are really influential in the digital space tend to fall into these elite users. Those elite users commanded 50% of the attention. So the links they shared, the stuff they talk about, got 50% of all attention on Twitter. The 10,000 most followed ordinary users, i.e. people who were just interesting and funny, but not particularly famous, they commanded only 5% of the attention. And it's quite a scary thought. One of the things that they found out was that for 500,000 people in the United States, Ashton Kutcher is their primary source of news information. The only things that they read were links that Ashton Kutcher tweeted, and that's how they found out what was happening in the world, right? This is frightening. Ellen also has got a massive following. So this is like Elvis meeting Tom Jones. There's a meeting of two legends, like two of the most influential people in the world. To be fair, Ashton Kutcher is not quite so influential now as he used to be. But just to kind of finish off, I just wanted to show that if you understand this and you leverage it, this is how you can achieve massive digital success, right? I'm going to commit another cardinal sin, which is talk about fucking Old Spice, like everybody does at every single conference ever. But the thing that I've never seen anyone mention about Old Spice was their strategy on the day in which they went out and they spoke to people and they started interacting, right? It's generally kind of like, oh, it was amazing, like users asked them to do stuff and then they made videos that replied, and like a guy proposed to his wife, and like so-and-so in the middle of nowhere got a really nice video. Oh, it was incredible, it was amazing. But what they did for the morning of that was they went out and they spoke to people who had massive digital influence. So if you look at the list of most watched videos, the ones that have racked up the most amount of views, it's really interesting because Ashton Kutcher, the most powerful man on Twitter at the time, he's not even in the top 10 most watched videos, the response that they gave to him. What is in the top 10 is the video that they did for Anonymous. So you know Anonymous, the super scary hacking group. Only brand I know that actually went out and spoke to them. It takes huge balls. But they did it, and it's the 5th most watched video from that day. Sorry, it's not the 5th, but anyway. The 5th most watched response, or the 6th most watched response is Kevin Rose. Do you know Kevin Rose? He founded Dig. So when I spoke about collectors, who are people who share stuff on Dig, the founder of the site that you could do that on, it's the 6th most watched response on this. It's like he's just a geek, digital geek. And the interesting thing is that the creative director said, there's nothing magical about what we've done. We brought a character to life using the social channels that we, social media geeks, use every day. And by specifically talking to social media geeks, by talking to people who cared about the internet, who really, really thought about it and really enjoyed it, they managed to rack up 183 million views of these various videos. So, your business is a digital business, whether you like it or not. And the way in which you can be successful is by understanding and leveraging digital culture. And that means creating things that are useful to people, that allow them to live a better life and be more useful. But it also means understanding their attitude, where they're coming from, and how you should behave. And finally, make something that you love. Thank you.